Commander Jace Marlowe sat alone in the pilot chair of the small scout ship Starlight. His ship drifted silently through Sector 9, far from any busy trade routes. It was supposed to be a routine scan for debris and space anomalies. Nothing exciting. Just long hours, blinking lights, and empty space. Then, something changed. A red light flashed on the control panel. A signal, faint, broken, but definitely a distress call. Jace leaned forward, frowning. "Unregistered frequency," he said, to himself. He tapped a few buttons, adjusting the communication feed. The signal grew louder, but he still couldn't understand the language. It wasn't any known human dialect or galactic standard. The voice sounded soft, almost musical, but desperate. A ship in trouble. Jace hesitated. His orders were clear. Observe, report, do not engage with unknown ships. But he was a soldier and a human being. He couldn't ignore a cry for help. "Hang in there," he whispered, setting course for the signal. As Starlight approached the source, Jace could finally see the ship. It was shaped like a crescent moon, glowing faintly in the dark. Pieces of it were floating away, broken panels, twisted wires, strange fluids. The ship was clearly damaged, maybe from a collision with debris or a failed warp jump. No other ships were nearby. Whoever was inside, they were alone. Jace docked his ship with the alien vessel, sealing the airlock with care. He wore his standard environment suit and carried a small toolkit, just in case. The doors opened with a hiss. Inside, the ship looked alive. The walls pulsed softly as if breathing. Vines or cables grew from the ceiling, blinking with soft light. It didn't feel like a machine. It felt like something grown, not built. "Strange tech," Jace muttered, stepping forward carefully. He followed a trail of liquid, something like blood, but silver, until he found the cockpit. A figure lay, slumped against the wall, breathing slowly. It was not human. The alien was tall and thin, with 4 fingers and smooth silver skin. Her large eyes blinked slowly when she saw him. She tried to speak but coughed weakly instead. Her suit was torn, and one of the strange vines from the ceiling was wrapped gently around her, almost like the ship was trying to help her. "I'm here to help," Jace said slowly, raising his hands in peace. The alien tilted her head. She didn't understand his words, but she didn't look afraid. Her eyes were tired but calm. Jace knelt beside her and pulled out his translator device. It beeped softly as it tried to learn her language from the distress signal. Words flickered. On the screen, "Power, reactor, danger, help." He nodded. "You need help fixing your ship. Reactor problem, I can do that." The alien blinked once and gave the smallest nod. Jace got to work. He moved carefully through the strange halls of the ship, guided by the soft lights and the flickering of the alien's hand signals. He reached the engine room. It was hot, flickering with blue light and pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. The reactor was cracked, leaking energy. Jace didn't know this kind of tech, but power was power. He used his tools to cool the system and reroute some of the flow. It was hard work, but he was trained for moments like this. Suddenly, a warning siren rang out. He ran back toward the cockpit, afraid something had gone wrong. But instead, he stopped in surprise. The alien, still weak, was standing now. Her suit was partly open, hanging from her body. She was removing it piece by piece, her silver skin glowing softly in the light of the ship. Jace turned away, thinking she was in pain or needing privacy. But when he looked back, she wasn't ashamed or scared. She stood still, calm, and let the last piece fall away. Her skin shimmered, then gently peeled in patches like it was shedding. The translator beeped again. "Not danger, sign of peace, shedding under stress, trust." Jace blinked in surprise. This wasn't an emergency reaction. It was part of her biology, like snakes on Earth shedding skin. But this was more than that. It was a message. She trusted him. Even though they couldn't speak the same words, she had shown him the deepest form of her trust. Jace smiled, feeling a strange warmth in the cold metal ship. He raised a hand in a salute. "We'll fix your ship together." And for the first time, the alien smiled back. The alien, now without her suit, sat on a soft-looking seat made of glowing vines. Her silver skin sparkled faintly in the low light. Jace stood nearby, trying not to stare, still surprised by what he had seen. The translator on his wrist beeped again, slowly building a better connection. It wasn't perfect, but it was learning. Skin, old stress, remove. Safe now. You help. Jace smiled and nodded. "You're welcome." The alien looked at him carefully. She pressed a button on a small panel, and a hologram appeared between them. It showed the inside of the ship, highlighting the reactor room. A part flashed red. Jace leaned closer. "So that's where the real trouble is." She tapped another part, pointing to herself and then to the panel. It seemed like she wanted to help him fix it. He raised his eyebrows. "You want to come with me?" She nodded once. "All right," he said. "Let's fix this ship together." Jace returned to the engine room with the alien following behind. The strange plant-like walls pulsed gently as they walked. He could feel the warmth from the reactor, still unstable, but holding. The alien crouched beside one of the panels. She placed her hand on it, and the wall opened like a flower. Inside were glowing threads and crystal-like circuits. Jace watched in amazement. "Your ship is alive?" She looked at him and smiled, then touched her own chest and pointed at the ship. It wasn't alive like an animal, but it was part of her, somehow. Maybe grown using her DNA. A living machine. Jace helped her pull out a broken piece of the reactor's cooling system. It was heavy and shaped like a glowing root. He carefully handed her a new part from his toolkit. She turned it over in her hands, confused. He showed her how it worked using slow movements and gentle words. She watched closely, then copied his actions. Together, they slid the part into place. The lights in the room brightened for a second. The ship responded with a low hum, like a deep sigh of relief. They were making progress. They continued repairing different sections of the ship, side by side. The alien moved with grace, her hands soft and quick. Jace worked carefully, using his tools and knowledge of basic power systems. The two worked like a team, even though they hardly spoke. They made jokes without words. She pretended to shock herself on a wire and fell backward, and he shook his head, laughing. He drew a smiley face in the dust on a control panel, and she added long ears and sharp teeth, making it look like herself. Both laughed quietly, their voices echoing in the empty ship. Over time, the translator improved. "Name?" she asked suddenly. Jace blinked. "Jace. Jace Marlowe." She nodded. "Elani." "Elani," Jace repeated, smiling. "Nice to meet you." She smiled back. "Jace. Fix. Elani. Safe." Jace chuckled. "We fix. We safe." Elani tilted her head, then gently touched her chest again. "Trust." Jace touched his chest in return. "Trust." As the last repair of the day finished, Elani led Jace to a small room. A soft blue light filled the space. She motioned for him to sit, and the wall formed a seat behind him. He sat, surprised. She walked over to a small pod in the wall. It opened like a fruit, and inside were round, glowing orbs. "Food?" Jace asked. She nodded. "Safe. For human." He took one carefully. It felt soft and warm. He bit into it. It tasted like sweet water and fresh fruit, refreshing after hours of work. He smiled wide. "That's really good." Elani laughed. "Jace likes." They ate together quietly. Even in silence, it was peaceful. The ship now hummed more steadily. Systems were slowly coming back online. Life support was strong and the reactor was stable. But communication systems were still offline. They were still alone in the darkness of Sector 9. Jace leaned back and sighed. "You've got a beautiful ship, Elani." Elani looked around proudly. My heart. In this ship? He looked at her curiously. You mean, you love it? She nodded. Qatari. Build with feeling, not just metal. Feeling, memory, life. Jace looked around with new eyes. It wasn't just a machine. It was her creation, maybe her home. And now, it was part of his story too. Outside the ship, stars blinked in silence. They were still, lost in space, but they had hope. They had each other. Jace and Elani sat in the softly glowing control room of the alien ship. The hum of the reactor was steady now, but their work was far from over. Communication systems still lay silent. Without a working comms array, no one would know they were stranded. The two of them needed to fix that next. Jace looked at Elani. She was studying the panels carefully, her eyes scanning strange symbols and lines that blinked with unknown meaning. He tried to understand her technology, but it was very different from anything he had seen before. Can you explain this? Jace asked, pointing to a control board covered in lights and moving shapes. Elani shook her head slowly. She didn't speak his language, and he couldn't speak hers, but she smiled and began to draw on a small screen with a finger. The screen showed a circle, then several lines connecting dots. She pointed to one dot and tapped it. A light on the control board blinked. She tapped another dot, and another light turned on. Jace watched closely and realized she was showing him a simple map of the system. The dots were parts of the ship's communication network, and the lines showed how they were connected. He nodded. Okay. If we can fix the broken links, maybe the signal will work again. Elani smiled and began to tap more dots and lines. Jace joined her, using the ship's controls to follow her instructions. Bit by bit, the network came back to life. Suddenly, a crackling sound echoed through the room. The communication system flickered on. Jace grinned. We did it. Elani's large eyes shone with relief and happiness. She reached out and touched Jace's arm gently. Good. Together, she said. Jace nodded. Together. Over the next few hours, Jace and Elani worked side by side. They fixed the communication systems, rerouted power to emergency beacons, and repaired the ship's navigation console. All the while, their understanding of each other grew. Language remained a challenge, but they found ways to talk without words. When Elani wanted to explain a complex system, she used drawings. When Jace wanted to ask questions, he used gestures and facial expressions. They shared small moments of humor. At one point, Jace mimed falling asleep while sitting at the control panel. Elani giggled softly and mimicked him, pretending to snore loudly. The sound echoed through the quiet ship, and they both laughed. Through these moments, a deep connection was forming. Jace saw that Elani was more than an alien engineer. She was curious, kind, and brave. Elani saw that Jace was not just a soldier. He was patient, clever, and caring. One evening, as the artificial lights dimmed to simulate night, Elani showed Jace something new. She took his hand and led him to a small room he hadn't noticed before. Inside, strange plants glowed. Softly, the air smelled sweet, unlike the cold metal of his own ship. Elani reached out and touched one of the plants. It responded, pulsing with light and changing colors slowly. She smiled. Life. Jace looked closely. It was a kind of living garden inside the ship, not just for beauty but for air and energy. The Qatari used nature and technology together. That's amazing, Jace said. You really live with your ship. Elani nodded. Ship, home, heart. Jace looked around, feeling a new respect. This was not just a machine to her. It was part of her family, her world. Later, as they returned to the control room, Jace paused. Why are you out here alone? He asked softly. Elani looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft light. She drew a small picture on the screen. A group of ships, then one separated from them. Her fingers traced a line from the group to the single ship. Exile, she said quietly. Jace's heart sank. The Qatari did not trust others, and she had been sent away alone on a mission no one else would take. Why? Elani shook her head slowly. Fear, war, pain. Jace understood. Fear often kept people apart, but here, now, they were breaking that fear. He touched her hand gently. You're not alone anymore. She looked at him, a small smile breaking through her tired eyes. Their work continued, but their mission changed. No longer just fixing a ship, Jace and Elani were building trust. Two very different beings, learning to understand each other piece by piece. As the ship hummed softly around them, the stars outside shone brightly. Somewhere in the vast dark, a new friendship was born. The soft hum of the ship filled the quiet corridors as Jace and Elani continued their work. The repairs were going well. The reactor was stable and the communication system was sending a faint signal. Hope was growing inside the small living ship. Suddenly the ship's alert system blared loudly. A sharp red light flashed on the control panel. Jace's heart raced. What is it? He asked, turning to Elani. She quickly moved to the main console. Her large eyes scanned the glowing screens. Warning, she said simply. Breach. Outside. Jace's mind raced. A breach in the hull could mean danger. Air would leak out, or worse, enemies might be near. He rushed to the nearest airlock with Elani close behind. The corridor outside was empty, but the external sensors showed something approaching fast, a small ship, sleek and dark, moving closer. Scavenger, Elani said, her voice low. Jace nodded. They both knew the stories. Scavengers were pirates who hunted disabled ships for parts. They showed no mercy and often attacked without warning. The little alien ship was closing in fast. It was clear it wanted to capture the damaged vessel. And whoever was inside, Jace's mind worked quickly. The alien ship had no weapons, only strange glowing tools and vines. They were peaceful engineers, not fighters. We need to defend the ship, Jace said. But we don't have weapons. Elani shook her head. Qatari, no weapons, only repair. Jace looked around the engine room, thinking fast. If they couldn't fight with weapons, maybe they could use the ship itself. Help me, he said. Together they began to work on the ship's defense systems. Jace opened a panel and found small drones, tiny machines designed for repairs and scanning. They weren't made for battle, but maybe they could help. Elani connected the drones to the ship's power. She used her knowledge of the living ship to boost their speed and control. Jace programmed them quickly to swarm the incoming ship. As the dark scavenger ship approached, the drones swarmed out like a cloud of glowing fireflies. They flew toward the enemy ship, distracting the scavenger's sensors and jamming their systems. The pirate ship's engines sputtered. The pilot inside cursed in a harsh voice, trying to shake the drones. Jace felt a surge of hope. Their plan was working. But then, the scavenger launched a small energy net, trying to trap the drones and disable them. Elani's eyes flashed. She touched the ship's living walls, sending a pulse of energy through the network. The vines inside the ship moved like a heartbeat, growing stronger and brighter. The drones swerved and darted through the net, breaking free. Jace smiled. Good work. The pirate ship's attacks grew more desperate. It fired a small missile that struck the hull. The ship shook, but the living walls absorbed most of the damage. Jace grabbed a control panel. We need a stronger defense. Elani pointed to the reactor core. Fusion pulse. Strong, but risky. Jace knew what she meant. The fusion pulse was a powerful burst of energy. If used correctly, it could disable the scavenger ship, but it could also damage their own ship. Can you help me trigger it safely? Jace asked. She nodded. Together, they hurried to the reactor room. Elani guided Jace through the complex system. Her knowledge of the living ship was amazing. She moved with confidence, touching panels and speaking softly to the ship. Jace followed her lead, working the controls. Together, they prepared the fusion pulse. The pirate ship was closing in fast now. The drones were almost out of energy. Ready? Jace asked. Elani nodded. Jace pressed the button. A bright blue pulse shot out from the ship's core. It spread, like a wave through space, hitting the pirate ship with a strong force. The scavenger ship's engines sputtered and died. The ship drifted helplessly, disabled. The danger was over. Jace and Eilani looked at each other, breathing hard. "We did it," Jace said. Eilani smiled. "Together." But the victory was not without cost. The fusion pulse damaged their own ship's systems. Alarms rang softly as the ship's power dropped. Jace frowned. "We need to fix this fast." Eilani placed her hand on his arm. "You rest, I fix." Jace shook his head. "No, we finish this together." Eilani smiled again, touched by his determination. As they worked side by side, the ship slowly recovered. The breach was sealed. The systems stabilized. Outside, the stars shone quietly. Jace looked at Eilani, feeling a deep respect. "You're brave," he said softly. She nodded. "You are kind." In the quiet moments after the attack, they realized how much they needed each other. In the vast, dark space, two strangers had become allies, and together, they would find a way home. The quiet after the attack was almost too peaceful. Jace and Eilani moved through the ship's corridors carefully, checking every system for damage. The fusion pulse had saved them, but it left their ship weak and vulnerable. Jace was tired. The adrenaline had faded, and the weight of exhaustion settled on his shoulders. He wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against a glowing wall. Eilani noticed and touched his arm gently. "Rest," she said softly. He shook his head. "Not yet. We need to finish the repairs." But soon after, a sudden jolt shook the ship. The lights flickered and alarms began to ring. Jace stumbled, hitting his head on the corner of a console. Darkness took him quickly. When he woke, he was in a small room, lying on a soft bed made of living fibers. Eilani sat beside him, watching closely. His head ached, but he was alive. "Welcome back," she said, her voice gentle. Jace tried to sit up, but Eilani placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rest more." He nodded, knowing she was right. As he rested, Eilani worked alone to stabilize the ship. She moved quickly through the engine room, her fingers dancing over controls, repairing circuits and rerouting power. The living ship responded, to her touch pulsing with renewed energy. Hours passed and Jace's strength returned. He joined Eilani in the engine room. "Anything new?" he asked. Eilani pointed to a screen showing fluctuating power levels. "Reactor unstable. Needs fusion. Pulse again." Jace frowned. "Another pulse? That's risky." She nodded. "But necessary. Without it, ship will die." They studied the controls. The fusion pulse was powerful energy that could reset the reactor and stabilize the systems. But it came with danger. Too much power, and the ship could explode. Too little, and the reactor would fail. Jace looked at Eilani. "Can you guide me again?" She smiled faintly. Together. Working side by side, they prepared the fusion pulse once more. This time, Jace felt more confident. He trusted Eilani's knowledge, and she trusted his experience. They synchronized their actions perfectly. Eilani adjusted the energy flow while Jace controlled the timing. At the right moment, Jace pressed the button. The ship shuddered as a bright, blue wave of energy spread through its core. The reactor stabilized and power levels rose steadily. They both sighed in relief. But their success was short-lived. Suddenly, the ship's sensors detected movement outside. The scanning screen showed small objects moving quickly, more scavengers. Jace's heart pounded. "Not again," he muttered. Eilani's eyes narrowed. "Must protect ship." Jace nodded. "We'll try something different." They quickly gathered the drones again and programmed them to form a moving shield around the ship. This time, they also used parts of the ship's living walls to create barriers that could absorb attacks. When the scavenger ships arrived, they found the defenses stronger than before. The drones swarmed out, blocking sensors and engines. The living barriers absorbed energy blasts. The scavengers attacked harder, firing energy beams and missiles. Jace and Eilani worked quickly. directing the drones and adjusting the barriers. The battle was intense, but the alien ship held strong. Finally, the scavenger ships gave up and fled into the darkness. After the fight, Jace looked at Ailani with new respect. "You're incredible," he said. She smiled. "Qatari survived by trusting the ship. Now, we survive together." Jace nodded. Together. The two sat quietly for a moment, listening to the steady hum of the ship. The danger was over, for now. In the days that followed, Jace and Ailani repaired the ship further. The fusion pulses had saved them twice, but the damage was deep. They worked to heal the living ship, blending technology and nature. They shared stories in their own way. Jace told Ailani about Earth, about humans who faced danger but never gave up. Ailani shared memories of the Qatari homeworld, a place of peace and beautiful forests. Though words were few, the connection between them grew stronger. They were no longer just pilot and engineer. They were friends. One night, as the ship drifted silently through space, Ailani touched Jace's arm. "Thank you," she said softly. Jace smiled. "For what?" "For trusting me, for helping me." He nodded. "We saved each other." She looked out the window at the stars. "Maybe together we can find a new path, for Qatari and humans." Jace agreed. A path of hope. They sat side by side watching the stars. Far away, new adventures waited. The starlight and the alien ship floated side by side, moving slowly toward human space. Their distress signals had finally been picked up by a UES rescue team. Jace and Ailani watched the approaching ships with hope and relief. They were close to safety, but things would not be simple. As the rescue ships docked, Jace felt a knot in his stomach. He knew he had broken orders by responding to the distress signal and boarding the alien ship. Military rules were strict, and some commanders did not trust aliens, especially those from unknown species like the Qatari. Ailani looked at Jace with quiet strength. Despite her calm, Jace could see the worry in her large eyes. They stepped onto the rescue ship together, greeted by uniformed officers. "Commander Marlowe," said a stern voice. "You disobeyed direct orders by engaging with an unknown alien vessel. Explain yourself." Jace took a deep breath. "I responded to a distress call. I saved a life. We repaired her ship and defended it from scavengers. We worked together to survive." The officers exchanged glances. It was true, but the rules were clear. Suddenly, Ailani stepped forward. She spoke slowly in broken galactic standard, her voice firm but polite. "Commander Marlowe did right. He helped. We are friends." The room fell silent. None had expected the alien to speak. Ailani's words touched something in the officers. Here was an alien showing trust and respect, asking for peace. One officer, a high-ranking diplomat, stepped forward. "We will review your actions," she said carefully, "but your cooperation is appreciated." Days passed. Jace and Ailani stayed on the rescue ship. They were debriefed and examined, but their bond grew stronger. Ailani learned more human words, and Jace learned more about the Qatari. They shared stories of their homes, their fears, and their hopes. Ailani spoke of her people's fears of war and their desire for peace. Jace told stories of Earth, where humans faced many dangers but kept fighting. Their friendship became a symbol, a hope for understanding between species. Finally, the day came for the hearing. Jace stood before a panel of commanders and diplomats. His heart beat fast. He told the story simply and honestly. How he found Ailani's ship, how they worked together to repair it, how they defended against scavengers, how trust grew between them. When he finished, Ailani was asked to speak. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "Humans are brave. They help, even when afraid. I trust Commander Marlowe. I trust humans." Her words were clear and strong. The panel considered carefully. They saw the truth in the story, and the hope in the friendship. In the end, Jace was not punished. Instead, he was commended for his courage and humanity. The council agreed to open dialogue with the Qatari, beginning a new chapter in interstellar relations. Jace and Elani were asked to serve as ambassadors. As they prepared to leave, Jace looked at Elani. "We made a difference," he said quietly. She smiled. "Together we changed the stars." And with that, they stepped forward into the future. A future where humans and aliens might walk together as friends. Months had passed since Commander Jace Marlowe and Elani first met aboard the damaged alien ship in Sector 9. Now, they stood side by side in a large hall filled with representatives from both humanity and the Qatari. The air buzzed with hope and nervous excitement. This was the beginning of something new, a chance for two very different species to understand one another. Jace looked around the room. Humans in their uniforms and suits spoke quietly with the tall, graceful Qatari. The Qatari had smooth, silver skin that shimmered in the light, and their large eyes held wisdom and curiosity. Despite their differences, everyone was here for the same reason: to build a future together. Elani turned to Jace and smiled. "We have come far." Jace nodded. "Farther than I ever imagined." The council meeting began. Leaders from both sides shared their hopes and concerns, but it was clear that the story of trust and courage between Jace and Elani had touched many hearts. After the formal talks, Jace and Elani took a moment outside the hall. The stars shone brightly in the night sky. Jace looked up and said, "I never thought one moment in space could change everything." Elani touched his arm gently. "Trust can change stars." They both laughed softly. In the following weeks, the two ambassadors worked tirelessly. They visited Qatari worlds and human colonies, sharing stories and learning from one another. They built schools where children of both species could learn side by side. They helped establish trade routes that brought new goods and ideas across the stars. Jace remembered the first time Elani had taken off her suit during the ship repair, a moment of trust and vulnerability. Now that trust had grown into a friendship that crossed galaxies. One day, as they walked through a garden filled with strange glowing plants from Elani's homeworld, she said, "Humans are strong, but also kind. We need both." Jace smiled. "You taught me that." Together they planted a tree, a living symbol of their friendship and the new alliance between their peoples. But not everyone was happy. Some on both sides feared change. They whispered that trusting aliens was dangerous. They worried about old wars and ancient rivalries. Jace and Elani faced these doubts with patience. They knew change was never easy. But they believed the future was worth the struggle. One evening, as they prepared for a speech to both peoples, Jace said, "We must show them that hope is stronger than fear." Elani agreed. "Together we shine brighter." Their speech was broadcast across human and Qatari space. They spoke of courage, trust, and the power of friendship. They reminded everyone that the stars were not so far apart after all. Years later, the alliance between humanity and the Qatari had grown strong. Trade and culture flourished. Joint missions explored new worlds, and children learned to speak both languages as easily as their own. Jace and Elani stood on a balcony overlooking a bustling spaceport, watching ships from both species come and go. Elani smiled. "Look at what we have built." Jace took her hand. From one act of trust, a whole new future. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night, as if remembering the moment when two strangers chose friendship over fear. And so, the story of the human who helped an alien shed her suit and the bond they formed became a legend told across the galaxy. It was a story of hope, a story of courage, a story that reminded everyone that even in the cold darkness of space, the warmth of trust and friendship could light the way.